It happened in front of hundreds of people on a bright Christmas charity morning. A little girl who had not stood on her own feet in nearly 6 years suddenly let go of her wheelchair, took one trembling step. Then another. Before collapsing into the arms of a complete stranger. Across the crowded hospital courtyard, her billionaire mother screamed, dropped to her knees, and burst into uncontrollable tears because the impossible had just happened. The miracle she had spent millions of dollars searching for had come from a struggling single father who had nothing left to give except kindness. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change lives, forgiveness heals broken hearts, hope should never die, and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community that believes love is stronger than wealth. Garrett Holden had learned that life could take everything away in a single afternoon. 3 years earlier, his wife had suffered a sudden brain aneurysm while preparing lunch, leaving him alone to raise their 7-year-old son, Owen. Every morning began before sunrise, but by the time the world was fully awake and sunlight poured across the streets, Garrett had already packed lunches, braided together a routine that barely held their lives together, and driven his son to school before heading to his maintenance job at St. Catherine's Children's Rehabilitation Center. He fixed broken elevators, repaired therapy equipment, painted peeling walls, and often worked through lunch because overtime meant another grocery bag at the end of the week. No one noticed Garrett very much. Doctors hurried past him. Executives walked by him without remembering his name. Wealthy donors assumed he was just another janitor pushing a toolbox from room to room. Garrett never minded. His late wife had once told him that the strongest people often carried invisible titles that never appeared on business cards. He carried that thought every day. His son Owen had inherited his mother's warm heart. Whenever Garrett finished work, father and son volunteered together during the hospital's afternoon recreation program. Owen read stories to young patients while Garrett repaired broken toys, built wooden puzzles, or quietly entertained frightened children with little tricks he had learned from his own father. Among the children was 11-year-old Beatrice Ellison, daughter of billionaire technology investor Julian Ellison and renowned architect Meredith Ellison. Newspapers called Beatrice the princess of an empire worth billions, but inside the rehabilitation center she was simply another child trapped inside a wheelchair after a devastating spinal disorder gradually stole her ability to walk. The world's finest surgeons had examined her. Specialists from Europe and North America had offered treatments. Experimental therapies had drained millions of dollars from her parents' fortune. Every promising breakthrough ended with another disappointment. Money had purchased every possibility except hope. Meredith rarely smiled anymore. The graceful woman who once designed award-winning museums now spent every daylight hour beside her daughter's therapy sessions, watching every failed attempt with a heart that seemed to break a little more each afternoon. Julian buried himself in business, convincing himself another medical breakthrough must exist somewhere if he simply funded enough research. Husband and wife slowly drifted apart beneath the crushing weight of helplessness. Garrett noticed something others overlooked. Whenever therapy became difficult, Beatrice never looked toward expensive medical equipment. She watched birds gathering outside the rehabilitation garden. Her eyes followed butterflies crossing the flowers. She smiled only when sunlight danced through leaves. Garrett remembered something his own grandfather had taught him after returning from military rehabilitation decades earlier. Recovery did not begin with muscles. It began with believing your body still belonged to you. Without asking for recognition, Garrett spent several weekends building something from leftover wood, discarded therapy materials, and donated garden supplies. By Monday morning, a small sensory walking garden stood behind the hospital. Smooth stones, soft grass, gentle ramps, colorful flowers, wind chimes, butterfly plants, and handrails created an environment where children could focus less on fear and more on curiosity. Hospital administrators almost removed it because it had not been part of any official project. Then the therapists tried it. Children laughed. Children attempted movements they had refused indoors. Children forgot they were exercising. The garden remained. Beatrice especially loved sitting there every afternoon, beneath a maple tree where warm daylight filtered through green leaves. Garrett never pressured her. Instead, he invited Owen to race butterflies, identify bird songs, and solve little wooden puzzles nearby. Before long, Beatrice naturally joined them. For the first time in months, Meredith heard her daughter laugh. That sound alone felt priceless. Weeks passed, Garrett quietly introduced games instead of exercises. Every challenge encouraged reaching, balancing, stretching, or shifting weight without making Beatrice feel like she was failing another medical test. She celebrated tiny victories everyone else overlooked. Moving one foot a few inches became winning a treasure hunt. Standing for 5 seconds became protecting a pretend castle. Smiling became part of healing. Even the therapists admitted something remarkable was happening. Her confidence returned before her strength did. Meredith watched from nearby benches, confused by emotions she had almost forgotten existed. She realized Garrett never treated Beatrice like a billionaire's daughter or a disabled patient. He simply treated her like a child who deserved joy. One sunny Saturday, the Rehabilitation Center hosted its annual Christmas Hope Festival during the day to raise funds for families unable to afford long-term treatment. Volunteers decorated the courtyard with evergreen wreaths, handmade ornaments, bright ribbons, children's artwork, and thousands of tiny bells sparkling beneath the winter sun. Garrett arrived early with Owen carrying homemade wooden ornaments they had carved together. They were simple, far less impressive than the luxurious donations arriving from wealthy sponsors. Yet every ornament carried the name of a child currently receiving treatment. Parents quietly wiped tears while reading them. Meredith found herself staring at one ornament bearing Beatrice's name. On the back Garrett had carved just 6 words. The strongest hearts never stop believing. She had not realized how desperately she needed to read those words. During the afternoon celebration, therapists organized a symbolic event. Children would each attempt one personal milestone before placing a star on the hospital's Christmas hope tree. Some painted, some lifted their arms independently, some spoke their first clear words after injury. Beatrice wanted only one thing. She wanted to stand. Doctors gently warned against expecting too much. Meredith nodded while secretly preparing herself for another heartbreaking disappointment. Garrett walked beside Beatrice into the sensory garden connected to the courtyard. Hundreds of guests watched quietly. Television crews covering the charity event turned their cameras toward the little girl everyone recognized from magazine covers featuring her family's philanthropy. Silence settled across the crowd. Garrett did not promise miracles. He simply reminded her of every tiny success she had already achieved. He reminded her of butterflies. Of bird songs. Of every smile she had earned herself. He reminded her that courage was measured one step at a time. Beatrice placed trembling hands on the wooden rail Garrett had built months earlier. She pushed upward, her knees shook violently. Several people looked away, unable to watch. Then something extraordinary happened. Instead of looking at the wheelchair behind her, Beatrice looked toward Owen, who stood several feet away holding one of the handmade wooden stars. The little boy smiled with complete confidence, not because he expected perfection, because he believed in her. Beatrice released one hand, then the other. She stood completely alone. The courtyard gasped. One careful step followed, then another. The distance was only a few feet, yet it felt larger than any mountain. She reached Owen, accepted the wooden star, and collapsed into Garrett's embrace, laughing and crying at exactly the same time. Across the courtyard, Meredith screamed before dropping onto the ground as years of bottled grief exploded into tears. Wealthy executives, surgeons, nurses, donors, and strangers all cried openly beneath the bright afternoon sky. Julian, who had spent years believing every problem required another investment, stood frozen. No financial report. No acquisition. No billion-dollar company. Nothing compared to watching his daughter take those few precious steps. News footage spread across the country before sunset. Reporters called it a miracle. Garrett refused every interview. He insisted the miracle belonged to Beatrice because she had found the courage herself. Medical specialists later explained that intensive therapy, natural progress, emotional confidence, and renewed motivation had all contributed to the breakthrough. It was not magic. It was the result of months of patient rehabilitation strengthened by hope, encouragement, and an environment that helped Beatrice believe in herself again. But to Meredith, it still felt like a miracle. Several days later, during another bright winter afternoon, the Ellisons invited Garrett and Owen to lunch at the Rehabilitation Center instead of an expensive restaurant. Meredith admitted something that surprised everyone. she confessed she had spent years believing wealth could solve every problem if she simply worked harder and paid more experts. Garrett had shown her something priceless. Children heal best when surrounded by love instead of pressure. Julian quietly asked Garrett what reward he wanted. Garrett requested only one thing that he asked that every child at St. Catherine's receive: access to sensory gardens, creative therapy spaces, and family support programs regardless of income. Julian smiled through tears. Within months, the Ellison Foundation funded similar rehabilitation gardens across children's hospitals throughout the country. None carried Garrett's name because he politely declined. Instead, every entrance displayed a simple plaque. Hope grows where kindness is planted. Years passed. Beatrice eventually walked independently, though slowly. She became an advocate for pediatric rehabilitation and often visited children beginning journeys similar to hers. Owen grew into a compassionate young man studying physical therapy because he never forgot watching one little girl take her first steps. Garrett continued fixing broken equipment every morning with the same quiet humility. Many visitors never realized the maintenance worker tightening bolts beside them had inspired a nationwide movement transforming pediatric rehabilitation. That he preferred it that way, because the greatest miracles were never about being famous, they were about making someone else's impossible day become possible. One bright Christmas afternoon many years later, the hospital courtyard filled again with families celebrating new recoveries. Children laughed among blooming gardens that had once existed only in one struggling father's imagination. Meredith watched dozens of wheelchairs moving toward therapy paths surrounded by flowers and realized her daughter's first steps had become thousands of first steps for children they would never even meet. Before we finish, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your life or when you refused to give up hope despite impossible circumstances. Your story may encourage someone who desperately needs it today. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember that kindness rarely makes headlines at first, but its echoes can travel farther than money, power, or fame ever will. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not helping someone walk again. Sometimes it is helping them believe they can take the very first step.